Welcome back, everyone. Pal Pondron Weather here. We've got major Hurricane Dora out there in the Pacific. It is looking really impressive. In fact, it's been looking impressive for a while now. It's still a major hurricane and still has 130-mile-per-hour winds associated with it. Look at that really just symmetrical eye. Fortunately, it is well south of Hawaii, but it's been out there an extremely long time. It's literally just due south of the Big Island right now and still packing winds of 130 miles an hour and still traversing west-northwest bound. So it's been with us a while. Apparently, it looks like it's going to be on like a 28-day cruise or something because it's not really going anywhere anytime soon. But luckily, it is going out in just the middle of the open waters. But if we expand the view and find out what's happening across the Atlantic for the rest of the ocean, there's not much, folks, right? I mean, we've got these little African waves that are coming off the coastline and trying to get its act together. But you can see once it gets into the Caribbean, it just completely shuts down. This is awfully clear out here in the Caribbean and just crystal clear out there in the Gulf of Mexico. There is just nothing going on. You can see further north, we've got that storm complex. We had that storm complex, those devastating winds that impacted parts of the east yesterday. It's still very heavy rain this morning and into the afternoon in portions of Maine, where they're going to be experiencing some flooding concerns this afternoon. But further south, we do have another complex of storms that's kind of be traversing right along that little boundary area. Those are going to be turning severe this afternoon, later on this evening, across portions of the southeast. And then we'll have another complex really starting to get its act together. Those will be diving east southeast as well. That's exactly the latest update from the SPC. Has in fact those two complexes of storms. The first one is what we're dealing with this afternoon across portions of central portions of the southeast. And then the new complex is going to be originating essentially east of the Rockies here. And then big time hail producers across this enhanced risk, area. And those are going to be packing a punch with very heavy winds and a lot of lightning with these things and some larger hail, especially within some very large hail, maybe some 2-inch plus diameter types large hail within the enhanced risk area. But headed into tomorrow, we've got that little boundary. It's going to be lifting further north. So it's going to be, as it does, it's going to be lifting further north as a warm front. And it's really going to be right along that boundary. We're going to be seeing new activity really start to take shape into the afternoon time frame, and the moisture is going to be following along with it. So you got the ridge of high pressure still going to be dominating a good part of the southern plains. And then as the warm front continues to lift northbound, it's going to be wringing out the precipitation across these regions back into the same areas that desperately really don't need in the areas, into the St. Louis region, back into portions of Arkansas and western Tennessee, as well as into Mississippi and Alabama. And that's exactly where the storm threat's going to be, and some of those heavier thunderstorms, and some of those could be turning severe as they get their act together into the Tulsa region, back into the Memphis region, into Huntsville, back into Nashville, all the way up into Paducah again, back into St. Louis, and these will continue to lift further off into the northeast. And headed into your Thursday time frame, there's the storm complex, right? So you got the little vorticity setting up shop across portions of Kentucky and western Tennessee, and that's where the heavier rains are going to be originating. So they're going to be starting out in the morning time frame and traversing up this chain, kind of similar, some of the same areas that got impacted with those higher winds yesterday. Unfortunately, I think we had 2 fatalities with a tree falling down on somebody's car out there. Some very dangerous storms. I saw numerous reports of 60 upwards to over 70-mile-per-hour winds and torrential rains yesterday. And they'll be impacted again heading into the day on your Thursday time frame across portions of eastern Tennessee, back into portions of West Virginia, getting into the Carolinas region, and that is still dealing with some of those power outages out there. At one point, I saw a million customers, unfortunately, without power in multiple states. So the power is starting to be slowly restored out there, but the heat continues for the South, folks. I mean, Texas is just devastating. The ridge is just not going anywhere, and it doesn't look like it's going anywhere anytime soon. As the Texas bake is the real deal this year, those triple digits will be adding up in a big way, and there's nothing to stop this ridge because there's nothing to take it or remove it away. As the heat just continues to pulse in that region. But further to the north, you've got all the instability. So heading into Friday, we'll have another piece of energy that's coming out of Canada that'll move across portions of Wisconsin, getting into Illinois again, and those will be traversing across portions of Michigan and getting into portions of the Ohio Valley with some heavier rain. So there's two pockets of energy. First, on the northern periphery of that Southern Plains Ridge, you've got some, storm complexes that kind of originate across portions of Colorado, and then they kind of deviate and move east southeastwards, and along these trajectory passed into Kansas, back into Oklahoma, into portions of Missouri, into Arkansas. This is kind of the same trajectory, and then we have a northern piece of the puzzle that gets its act together, originating into portions of southern Canada, and those dive through Minnesota, dive through portions of Wisconsin, and then heading into portions of Michigan. And then once they get up into the northeast and they really wring out the precipitation, and some very heavy rain is still going to be transpiring even into that region heading into the weekend. Because overall, for the next 5 days through Sunday, you can see those two pulses of energy. The first one really highlighted over portions of Kansas and to portions of Oklahoma, back into Arkansas, Missouri, heading into western Tennessee, back into Mississippi, through Kentucky region, and then you have that northern side originating in the portions of Canada, and those dive east southeastward, really start to get its act together across portions of Maine, really adding to those rainfall totals across those regions where they've seen plenty of it. As of late. But there's the ridge, folks. Even as we go into next week, the heat just continues to expand and actually gets even more intense, if you can believe it or not, across Texas, across New Mexico, and across portions of Arizona. I mean, this is a 597 DM high pressure. And then, yes, you can see another little notch and little vorticity up there in portions of the Great Lakes. And that's where the cooler boundary is. That's where the cooler pocket aloft is. And that's where most of the instability is going to be heading into early next week. And you can see that on the 500 millibar display. You see that cooler pocket aloft coming out of Canada again, swinging into portions of Wisconsin, heading through Michigan. You got the southern branch as the ridge really starts to elevate and maximize itself over the good part of the south. Really, the only difference is this piece up here across the Pacific Northwest really elevates these temperatures inland. So this is some of the highest temperatures likely they'll see so far this summer. And then further south, you see this little piece here. There's not much precipitation with this, but what it's going to do, it's really going to be elevating the winds across portions of California and across the desert Southwest. And you'll have a little bit slightly cooler conditions. So you'll have this cool pocket across Southern California and portions of Arizona, even into Phoenix. You might not actually even be as hot as portions of Texas, if you can believe that or not. But you can see where the ridge is, right? It's well south, and you've got that impulses of energy in the middle of the country with those little bit cooler aloft. And then you've got the heat really starting to build across the western regions, especially into the Pacific Northwest. But there's that little vorticity that's hanging out across the West Coast. This is early next week, getting into sort of like the middle of the month, middle of August there. And that little spin will spin up the winds, and some of this vegetation is going to be really bone dry. The humidity values are really going to be dropping in a big way, probably increased fire risk out here. So we're going to be seeing these winds really maximizing and really pick up across these regions, around the Four Corners regions, by the middle of the month, and heading in towards that like the 20th time frame. Really going to start to see these winds as the humidity levels really drop down to nothing, because these areas are obviously bone dry. They really haven't had a monsoon this year. Continues to remain dry in Texas, across New Mexico and Arizona, back into California. But when you increase the winds, dry vegetation, you're going to increase the fire danger, unfortunately, across these regions. And that continues through the middle of the month. So what does continue as well, even looking at the ensembles later on in the period, it's just ridge. I'm trying to find any respite of this ridge and trying to move it out of the picture, but it does not want to. Every time you think it's going away and not coming back for good, it just reinforces and re-amplifies and just expands. So when you're seeing an ensemble member even 342 hours out by the 22nd and looking like this, that's some crazy stuff, folks. I mean, it encompasses a good part of the lower 48 with just plenty of heat. So obviously that would put more of a zonal flow further to the north, and any activity would be able to squeeze out in some of these same regions across the north central states, and across portions of the upper Midwest, and across portions of the Great Lakes. And so there's the precipitation display on the ensemble guidance for the next 2 weeks. So you've got all that brown shaded area, you've got well below average precipitation, almost next to nothing underneath that ridge of high pressure. All the action, and it's going to be two fronts, and like I talked about, really originating east of the Rockies, and these complexes are going to be traversing across this similar type zone into portions Nebraska, Kansas, through northeastern portions of Oklahoma, through Arkansas, but especially the bullseye areas are Missouri, southern Illinois, western Kentucky, western Tennessee. Those are kind of the favorite areas to see in the most rainfall. And then you have another piece of the puzzle further north. These originate in southern Canada. They go through the northern portions of the Great Lakes, but then they really maximize up here in the portions of the Northeast and heading into New England, and especially areas like Vermont and New Hampshire, and especially into Maine. The very heavy rain really over the next 2 weeks, as those rainfall totals and those flood warnings, flood watches, those will be likely over a period of time over the next 2 weeks, as you got plenty of rain heading your way for that area. So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video, definitely hit the subscribe button, and catch me next update where I protect you for and after storm.